The meeting to order, special meeting of March 5th, 2024 at 5:02 PM. Roll call, Mr. Steele.
Thank you. Commissioner Bogus?
Present.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Lamb? Commissioner Sanchez? Here. Commissioner Wiseman Ward? Thank you. Vice President Alexander? Here. President Matami?
Here.
Thank you.
Accessibility information, translation services, virtual meeting information can all be found under Section A, General Information. We will now take public comment before this board goes into closed session. I call for any speakers to the closed session items listed in the agenda. There will be a total of 5 minutes for speakers. Are there any speakers for public comment?
There are none in person nor on Zoom.
All right. I now recess this meeting at 5:03.
SFUSD will provide closed captioning and American Sign Language ASL interpreter services throughout today's board meeting. Live transcription can be found here, https://www.streamtext.net/event=SFUSD dashboard. Attendees who wish to provide public comment to the board and would like an ASL interpreter can use the Q&A box in the Zoom app to type their name or handle and list the item or items on the agenda they would like to comment on. The attendee will need to have a functioning camera in order to communicate with the interpreter and the board. When it is the attendee's opportunity to provide comment, the Zoom host will promote the attendee to panelists and enable the attendee's video. Translation, go ahead, please.
Thank you. SFUSD is offering interpretation services in Spanish and Cantonese. If you need interpretation, please dial the following phone number. After dialing, please enter the ZP number. This message will be repeated in Spanish and Cantonese. Buenas tardes, el Distrito Escolar Unificado de San Francisco ofrece servicios de interpretación en el idioma español. Si necesita interpretación por medio de Google Meet, por favor marque el siguiente número telefónico seguido de la clave de acceso. 1-319-382-9676. Por favor introduzca la clave 665-996-976 seguido de la tecla numeral o tecla gato. Cantonese interpreter, please. Thank you.
各位家長晚上好，三藩市聯合校區將會為今晚嘅會議提供廣東話傳譯服務。若果你有需要的話咧，可以打熒幕上面顯示嘅電話號碼，電話號碼係1484-854-3328。接通之後，請輸入密碼721-609-895井字。唔該 ，Thank you。
Thank you. That concludes translation services.
Okay, so reconvening at 6:31 PM, special meeting of March 5th, 2024. There are no closed session actions to report. And at this time, I'll take public comment on agenda items. The public may speak on any or all 5 of the resolutions posted to the agenda under action items. Because this is a meeting of the board, a special meeting of the board, we will not be taking public on non-agenda items. And we will only be taking in-person comments. All speakers will receive 1 minute to speak, and we have clocks visible to help you time and pace yourself. In addition, before I forget, our draft agendas are published 12 days prior to the meeting date with our final agenda posted 72 hours in advance. And we have, we also publish staff responses to commissioner questions on agenda items, and that document can be found tonight as item E1. Do we have public comment at this time?
Yes, we do. We have one. Tiana Tillery.
Good evening. My name is Tiana Tillery, and I'm the Vice President for Paraeducators with the United Educators of San Francisco. I'm also a long-term paraeducator here in SFUSD. I wanted to share my thoughts about the proposed recommendations to reduce or lay off paraeducators and certificated educators, but particularly our paraeducators. I do understand that we are facing a significant budget crisis and that hard choices have to be made no matter where to cut from. But the thought that we would recommend to reduce the FTEs for paraeducators who are some of the lowest paid employees, honestly, is just insulting. The paraeducators who are potentially being laid off are mostly people of color, and a large percentage are women. We come from the communities that our students come from and are able to quickly build relational trust with them and their families. Losing any of our paras would directly impact our schools, our students, and our families. I'm really hoping that you would try to find other ways to reduce the budgets and not on the backs of the paraeducators. Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. So moving on to item D1, I would like to move and discuss all of the resolutions together. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's special meeting, yeah. Okay, so we have a first and a second, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Wayne to introduce the item. Oh, no, after discussion. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, President Matomedy. Good evening. I'd like to bring up our Associate Superintendent of Human Resources, Amy Baer, just to share more about the process we've gone through and what's being presented. So the public understands. I want to appreciate Ms. Baer for her work on and the Human Resources team organizing this.
So tonight, staff will be asking the board for the authorization to notice administrative, paraprofessional, and certificated staff that their positions may be changed, reduced, or eliminated for the 24-25 school year. I will also be discussing employee rights after layoffs and the next step if the board does take action. So how do we go from having a staffing crisis to talking about reducing positions? San Francisco Unified School District opened this school year with a high number of classroom vacancies. So how could we possibly be laying off staff now for the 24-25 school year? In the past few years, we have not aligned staffing with enrollment. So the district has been simultaneously under and overstaffed depending on the credential area. For the 24-25 school year, we will be staffing to the contract. We are following the class sizes that we've negotiated with our labor partners, and we'll also be aligning staffing to enrollment and not relying on historical staffing allocations. So tonight, we'd be asking the board to issue preliminary notices as a worst case scenario. March 15th is an important date in human resources. California Ed Code imposes a March 15th deadline for non-reelection of probationary certificated staff, which the board did at the last meeting. It's also the deadline to reduce or change some classified and all certificated positions, including administrative positions. A note that civil service positions follow a different later timeline. March 15th is very early, so we haven't finalized budgets, enrollment, and staffing. They're still in flux. So I really want to stress that these are preliminary notices and the final deadline is May 15th. Next slide, please. So again, I'll be asking for the authorization to notice central office administration, certificated staff by credential area, and some classified staff. And I'll go into more detail on each of these on the following slides. So first, I'd like to talk about administrator notices. We are requesting that 110 central office administrators be notified that they may be released from their current assignment and reassigned either to a classroom position or another administrative position. Again, this is a preliminary notice and we are required to provide a final notice prior to July 1st. Next slide. Next up is certificated staff, and this applies in this case to teachers and counselors. We're asking to provide a preliminary notice by March 15th by credential area and seniority. As we finalize budget enrollment and staffing in the spring, we can rescind these notices. If a final layoff is needed, these notices must be provided by May 15th. If staff is actually laid off, I want to be clear that they are entitled to return by seniority date. Permanent staff would retain reemployment rights for 36 months and probationary staff would be entitled to reemployment for 24 months. Moving on to classified, if you could go back one slide, thank you. Classified paraeducator notices. Sites are in the process of finalizing their budgets and determining what staff they will be able to fund for the 24-25 school year. As a result, we are recommending to notice 3 categories of paraprofessional positions. We expect that many of these will continue to be funded. And again, this is a worst case scenario. Paraprofessionals will also receive a final notice on May 15th. And if laid off, are entitled to the same reemployment rights as certificated employees. So the next slide covers the timeline. If the board takes action, we will notice employees by March 15th. Certificated and classified staff will be noticed in seniority order. The district has worked with our labor partners at UESF to expedite the process for coach selection and placement of consolidated employees in late March. This moves up the consolidation process by 5 weeks and really is a major improvement in our hiring process. This would allow us to do open hiring by credential areas in early April. If final layoff notices are necessary, they would be sent in May. And our goal is to have staffing completed in June and ready to open schools in August. So to summarize, we are asking the board to take action to issue preliminary notices by seniority and credential area. During March and April, we will be finalizing staffing and enrollment and budgets will be clarified. If final notices are necessary, they will be issued by May 15th. And we are committed to working with our labor partners to negotiate the impact of reductions and just minimize the disruption to our employees. Any questions?
Thank you. And yeah, we do want to recognize this is a difficult process. And as Ms. Baer said, it's required by law. We do it at this time. And so we need to be mindful in our budget planning. But it is a may not renew notice. And we want to emphasize our main priority is to start the school year fully staffed. And so we will be communicating when sharing these notices that we do value our staff and we're working hard to make sure that we can retain our staff and again, first and foremost, open the year fully staffed while also fulfilling our fiscal obligations.
Okay, and I'm aware that Elliot Duchan, our fiscal expert, is on Zoom and would like to make some comments if possible before we open up for discussion.
Thank you, President Matomedy. Thank you, Ms. Baer. Great presentation. I think that, as you point out, this is a necessary step in a long timeline. Staffing is very difficult, particularly in these times. It's difficult to staff and it's difficult to reduce staff, which you are not alone. School districts across the state are doing exactly the same thing with concerns about providing adequate staffing in the fall and concerns about being under budgeted for the staff they currently have. Districts are having to do this in terms of reduction in force. Pick up almost any local paper and you'll see local districts doing the same thing. I recognize for employees, this is very difficult. It's a tough time. Certainly wish you the best. I will tell you that this, from the state's point of view, from the point of view of fiscal experts, what we have to see is a balanced budget. District has taken many, many steps to get to this point, and there are many to go. So I, want to clearly say to the board that as painful as this may be, and I know it is, I've been on both sides of this more than once, unfortunately, and I don't like either side. But it's also necessary to have school districts not overexpend the public funds that they get from taxpayers and throughout their area. So I commend staff for putting together this plan and commend the board for taking the tough steps necessary to get a balanced budget and bring the district back into fiscal solvency. Those would conclude my comments, President Matomedy.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and providing the presentation this morning or this evening. Much appreciated. And thank you to Mr. Duchamp for supporting us from the state on behalf of the Department of Education. And at this time, I would like to open it up to commissioners if there's any clarifying questions. Any other comments or questions that commissioners would like to bring forward at this time, and keep your comments to around 2 minutes if so.
Yeah, I have a question, I think directed towards the superintendent. If you could just talk a little bit about how these actions, which I think help us accomplish our budgetary goals, help us reach the academic goals we have for student outcomes, and kind of the alignment of that, or I guess like what the expectation is in regard to if those things are still realistic with the kind of possibilities that are being kind of put forth with what we're being asked to vote on today.
Yeah, so the most important resource we have when we think about meeting our goals and guardrails is our staff. And starting the school year understaffed has been a challenge. And so we did make an investment in our staff by providing salaries that we believe are more competitive to recruit and retain. And then this action is reflecting the need to make sure we're moving forward in a fiscally solvent way. And so then to specifically answer your question, where are the positions that are noted on this list are coming from really two sources. So one is after having done initial allocations to school sites, where in that we've built in the strategies and the support we think is necessary to meet the goals and guardrails. This is then what may not continue, depending on there's still the time in our budgeting process for schools to decide how to use the funds. Secondly, you'll notice that it's a selective list. So for example, we have a goal around math. We've had people come to the Board of Education say their students have not had math teachers for the year. You don't see any math teachers on that list because we need to make sure that all our math classrooms are filled. Same thing with special education. We've had many families come here with special education. You don't see any special education paraeducators listed on these layoffs. And so the idea is the positions that are listed, we value all the support that's provided, but in the staffing model are the ones that we think are necessary for the district-wide improvement, and then we're leaving schools the decisions on what additional support might be necessary with the funds they have, and that's where these positions fall and may or may not. That's why it's a may not renew. We'll find out as we go through the budgeting process where it all lands.
I guess just in response, I appreciate that. And I guess the thing that I guess I'm wondering is how are sites, how are families, how are educators, how are students assured that these reductions won't lead to kind of harm in their classroom experience, right? And I know that we're kind of saying that overall, it gives us more flexibility to provide support. But I guess I'm just curious, like, what is the plan to kind of ensure that each and every is getting what they need to be successful, kind of in alignment with our goals? And I think that's the piece that's missing for me. And I'm hoping that will be kind of filled in as we kind of get closer to May and kind of the next time that this will kind of come back around to us.
Thanks. And I do just want to point out, I know there's also what's our intent versus the impact. And so can't guarantee how everybody will feel the impact of this. But just, I do want to say what is different that we're doing that hasn't been done before is our intent is to communicate very clearly through our school budget and staffing resource guide, like what you can expect at your schools. And so, you know, for example, that you should expect to be able to have our elementary students, you know, an hour a week of PE, library time, arts time. And so then now in a way that we haven't done before, we're going to be held accountable. So if a school's not able to schedule that, we're going to need to look back at the staffing allocation to show, well, here's how we think you can do it, or we're going to need to change the allocation. So that documenting that commitment is new and different. And you'll see more of that as we bring forward the budget.
Thank you. And this is scary to be approving potential layoffs, right? This is, and so I appreciate that this is worst case scenario, and the intention is to hopefully have places for all of these educators and paras and everyone, central office staff next year. So I appreciate that. Clarification as far as our para educators go. I see, so as I understand it, the S10s are our para educators in special education. T10s are security. R10s, are those our family liaisons?
The R series does, has family liaisons in it. I can't specifically tell you which number corresponds to which job.
Okay, and then the A paras, then that seems to be the highest number at 56.
And those are, as I understand it, those are elementary, classroom paraprofessionals.
Okay. Okay, I know that within our paraeducators, very often, while they don't have credentials, many of our paras do have very specialized training to address the concerns in the classrooms where they're sitting and the students who they're serving. So I'm wondering if there's any flexibility in item 6 when we talk about skipping and keeping folks with special credentials. Can we also write in some verbiage there to maybe allow some of our paras who have taken additional training to support, you know, like in special ed, we've got the registered behavior technicians, right? So while they might not have a credential, they certainly do have extra training that is necessary. So where that does exist in the other areas like our paras, is there any way that we can recognize that and use that in the skipping process with seniority as well?
So the skipping and tiebreaker criteria are specific to the certificated seniority list. But the impact of negotiations is negotiable, and the impact of layoffs, sorry, is negotiable. And so we're certainly willing to work with UESF to prioritize how that would look. But the resolutions you have tonight are really specific to certificated staff for skipping.
And paras are, and yet we have a list of over 100 paras. So is there, if we're going to be voting on a resolution tonight, is there anything we can do to make sure that there's something in this language that says, as long as we're working with our labor partners, we recognize that special training in the layoff process as well? I don't know. I mean, I'll offer a friendly amendment if it helps, but I just, this screws us all the time when it comes to para layoffs. And I hate to see us making the same mistake over and over and over again. That's the definition of insanity, correct?
So I think what Ms. Baer was explaining, yeah, there's rules for certificated that have the skipping, but for any layoffs, once approved, there's a process with the union where you negotiate the impacts. And some of them are already determined because like seniority, but there are opportunities to discuss. So I don't think you can make an amendment to the resolution because it's a negotiable item. But since we're your representatives in negotiating, if this is something that the Board of Education, you know, feels is important to consider, you know, we can take that feedback. And then when meeting with UESF, we can say, as we're, you know, assessing the impact of these layoffs, this is something we'd like to consider when deciding who gets the notice. And then that would be negotiated, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. And I would like to see that would be my direction, is please in the negotiations, please in the bargaining, take into account the specialty, the the experience and the specialty that is there as much as the seniority.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for your hard work in putting this together. I know it's a challenging process, and I want to acknowledge that the lack of surprise and the fact that we have been working collaboratively with our labor partners is seen, and it's seen in the tenor of what's being brought forward and in the partnership going forward. And I know that none of us want to see these, we are very hopeful and optimistic that we will be in a position to rescind, but we know we have to go through this process. So thank you very much for doing the diligence to get the list correct and reflective of seniority and dates and so forth. So I just want to appreciate you for all the hard work you and your team has done. And at that time, or would you like to? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Can we go ahead and roll call vote, please, Judson?
Yes, we can. So on all 5 of the resolutions, 243-5 SP1, 243-5 SP2, 243-5 SP3, 243-5 SP4, and 243-5 SP5. Commissioner Bogus,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Lamb,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiseman Ward,
Yes.
Vice President Alexander. Yes. President Matomedy,
Yes.
7 ayes, passes.
Thank you so much. And at this time at 6:53, I adjourn this meeting. Thanks.